My heart pounded with anticipation as I gazed out over the horizon, searching for any sign of solid earth. After weeks at sea, my fellow warriors and I were growing restless and eager for landfall. And then, like the call of the Valkyries, I beheld it. The coastline loomed ahead of me, and my eyes were drawn to the towering windswept cliffs that rose up from the sea and reflected the light of the sun. They were a sight to behold, imposing and majestic, with their rocky faces battered by the relentless waves of the sea. The sheer size of these cliffs was enough to make our longship feel small and insignificant in comparison. My excitement surged as we sailed along shore, ready to uncover the secrets and treasures that awaited us in the vast expanse of forest that loomed before us, beckoning us to explore its depths. The air was thick and heavy, carrying a scent of salt and earth that brought new life to me. I felt as if I had entered a realm beyond my wildest dreams, a world that would challenge and test my skills as a warrior. As we reached our longship, my heart quickened with a mix of trepidation and excitement. What awaited us in this foreign land? How fared our brethren who had arrived before us? Would we find our friend or our foe, or face untold dangers and horrors? Yet I knew that the spirit of our band was not to be cowed by fear or uncertainty. We had come too far, battled too hard, to turn back now. And so, with sword in hand and the thrill of discovery driving us forward, we set foot on this strange new land, determined to conquer its unknown wonders and dangers. But in the back of our minds, we're hoping to find our tribe's people who have arrived before us, whose fate is still unknown. As I look around, I see my traveling companions, a group of hardy warriors and their families, all seeking a new life in this foreign land. The length of their beards and the skill of their sword arms are a testament to our countless battles together, standing side by side in our shield wall, and now they have brought their wives and children to start anew in this land. Their strength and courage are evident in their faces, their eyes shining with a fierce determination. Each man carries his weapons with a sense of pride, as if they are extensions of his own being. I can see the years of hard living etched into their faces, the scars from old wounds telling the stories of their past battles. But these are not just warriors. They are fathers and husbands, protectors of their families. Their wives and children walk with a sense of purpose, each one eager to make a new home in this foreign land. The women are just as fierce and resilient as their husbands are, their hands calloused from years of hard work and their faces weathered by the elements. Hofnir, the leader of our group, is a man who commands respect and admiration from all who know him. At first because of his domineering figure and powerful command of men, but most importantly because his strength of character was evident in the way he carried himself. Shoulders back, chin held high, and in the fierce determination that burned in his eyes. He had a way of speaking that could stir even the most apathetic soul to action, and his voice carried across the battlefield like a war horn, instilling courage and hope in his followers. Many of us would not be willing to embark on such a quest as this if not for the deep-rooted ash tree that was Hofnir, and he knew it. Despite his imposing presence, Hofnir had a gentler side too. He was a devoted husband and father, and his love for his family was evident in the way he interacted with them. His wife, who was a fierce warrior in her own right, stood by his side, and their young sons looked up to him with a mixture of awe and adoration. It was this sense of honor and familial duty within Hofnir that sparked the entire flame that was this adventure. Hofnir's older brother Arngir, whom he respected, had set sail with his clan about 7 seasons prior to our expedition. We had expected a ship to return laden with provisions for trade and bearing news of their colony, but none had returned. Hofnir secretly feared the worst, that the colony his brother set out to establish had met with disaster, but held on to the hope that the messenger ship either did not depart for some benign reason, or had been taken by the sea during the return voyage. As we travel together, I am repeatedly struck by the sense of camaraderie that exists between these families. Having been through so much together, their bond is iron. I feel honored to be counted among their number, and know that our band will face whatever challenges come our way. I am also reminded of why I am here. Hrolfnir was the man who everybody could count on, and Hrolfnir counted on me. The life I've led and the experiences I've had have left me too cold and weary for the gentle warmth of family life. My family is my band, and my wife is my sword, as it always has been. "You're my cloud lifter, Halfdan," Hrolfnir would always tell me. He valued my perspective, untainted by the comforts of human intimacy. Having an unburdened heart that can be as icy as a windswept winter fjord has its uses when it comes to right-minded decision-making. My counsels had oft saved Hrolfnir many a headache when the families and their concerns became too heated. My position as a sort of sage also meant that band members in conflict listened to me, as I appeared to be a neutral party. As well, having been both baptized and initiated, and having a good head for ritual, means I hold sway with the Christians and old believers alike, two streams of spirit that run deep in our band. It was I who let our crew know that landfall was close, as my ship ravens had not returned when released. And it was I who comforted the widow of the man we lost at sea. It was these abilities to work with and understand current and future events using the tools of spirit that made me a necessity for this expedition, in Hrolfnir's view. I know that what I say and do holds sway, especially with Hrolfnir, and so I have learned to be slow to speak, and to speak little when I do. As men busied themselves with the tasks of scouting the beach and taking stock of our ships and provisions, the women set to making a fire and preparing our first meal on solid ground. The mood of the group was excellent, as the pleasant chatter of excited souls filled the air around. The women were in such a jovial mood that they were brought to laughter by simple things, so that even those who had been bitter with one another on the open sea now shared tasks and talked with joy. It was always the first challenge of any serious sea expedition to maintain the cohesion of the band through the rigors of seemingly endless rocking and saltwater spray, and to this end Hrolfnir had clearly succeeded, to nobody's surprise. The comfortable presence of the afternoon sun seemed to show that nature was sharing in our good mood, and that fate was on our side. Scouts determined that it would be too difficult to scale the cliffs here, and so we continued down the coastline and found an area where our band could ascend with ease. After finishing the arduous task of unloading the seawater-soaked provisions and materials we had stowed along with us, we made first camp at the top of the cliffs, overlooking the vast ocean that had been our home and pressing against the endless woods that would be our destiny. The air was bitterly cold and whipped at our faces as we trudged along the rocky coastline. Our heavy furs were the only things keeping us from freezing in the icy winds that seemed to cut straight to our bones. We had been walking for weeks, searching for any sign of Hrolfnir's brother's settlement. Our provisions were running low, and morale was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Day after day, we continued on with nothing to break the monotony, except for the occasional jagged cliffs and scree slopes that we had to navigate. One of the younger children in our band came down with a fever, and despite our best efforts, he passed away. We held a simple funeral for him, burying him near the shore with a small cairn of rocks to mark the spot. The rest of us mourned quietly, knowing that we could be next. As we continued our search, we encountered only desolate and barren landscapes. The few animals that we came across were skittish and elusive. We saw no signs of any other people, and our hopes were dwindling. But just as we were about to give up hope, we discovered a small freshwater stream that seemed to be leading inland, and to the elation of the entire group, evidence of a campfire next to the trail. It was a welcome sight, and we followed it as it wound its way through the rocky terrain. As we trekked for what felt like an eternity, our eyes scanned the barren landscape for any indication of civilization. With each passing hour, the uncertainty of our mission grew, but Hrolfnir remained resolute in his quest to find his brother and his people. The thrill of the hunt kept us moving, fueled by the hope of discovering the unmistakable landmarks and trails that would have been left behind by our kin. Our spirits were high, but with every passing mile, the search for our lost brethren grew more intense. As we ventured deeper into the thick woods, we came across a strange sight. A large area where several mature trees had been knocked over, their deep roots now exposed to the sun. The stench in the air was foul, a sickening blend of rot and decay that made my stomach turn. The more superstitious members of our band started to lose their nerve. Some whispered of curses and malevolent spirits haunting this place. Others suggested turning back, fearing what might have caused this devastation. I could feel the tension rising, infecting the entire group like a contagion. I tried to maintain my composure, but the sight was disconcerting. We had not encountered such destruction in our travels thus far. As I looked around, I noticed that some of the trees had not been felled by axes, instead their bark torn away in jagged chunks. It was clear that someone or something had been here, but who or what remained a mystery. "What size of man or beast would it take to do that?" a band member worried, as we continued on. The unease lingered. The sounds of the forest seemed muted, as if even the animals were wary of this place. I kept my hand on the hilt of my sword, ready for whatever might come our way. Little did we know, the true danger was still lurking in the shadows, waiting to reveal itself. As we made camp the next night, a group of scouts returned with troubled looks etched on their faces. We gathered around the fire, eager to hear what they had found on their expedition. "We stumbled upon a strange sight," one of the scouts spoke up. "It was as if the ground itself had been desecrated." "Desecrated?" Wolfnir echoed, curious and wary all at once. "Aye, sir. There were animals sacrificed and bizarre imagery etched into the earth." The scout continued, his voice barely above a whisper. The air grew thick with tension as the implications of the scout's words sank in. The band was on unfamiliar land, and the presence of foreign rites and rituals left little doubt that something other than our kin was in these woods. "What kind of creatures were sacrificed?" one of the band members asked, the fear in his voice evident. "I couldn't tell, sir. The remains were mostly consumed by scavengers," the scout replied. The unease and discomfort among the band members was intense. Some whispered of curses and malevolent spirits, while others tried to rationalize the strange occurrence as a mere quirk of the land. The tension between those who identified with the old gods and those who followed the path of Christ only added to the growing sense of unease. Some were crossing themselves and mumbling myriad prayers, others gripping talismans and huddling together, sharing hushed incantations. Even Hofnir, who is usually level-headed and practical, seemed to be feeling the weight of the situation. He had been preoccupied with comforting his wife and sons, but wasn't entirely comfortable himself. I did my best to quell the rising fear among the band, but I knew that this was only the beginning of the challenges we would face in this strange and hostile land. Later that night, when most of the band was asleep or resting, Hofnir sought my counsel by the fire. "Something isn't right, Halfdan. I try to hide it, but my face betrays me to the band. I fear something dark stalks these lands," he whispered sharply. I nodded, sensing the weight of his words. "I understand your concern, Hofnir, but we must keep our wits about us and stay vigilant. We don't know what we're up against, but we have each other and we have our weapons. We'll face whatever comes our way with bravery and determination." Hofnir looked at me skeptically. "But what about the tension among our group? They're starting to blame one another." I sighed, knowing that this was a problem that wouldn't easily be solved. We must find a way to bridge the divide, to bring everyone together for the sake of our survival. It won't be easy, but we must try, and we must remember that we are one band, united by our blood and our heritage. Hofnir nodded, looking slightly reassured. "You're right, Halfdan. We must stand together, no matter what." After this, I distracted Hofnir's troubled mind with more mundane concerns. The plan for the morrow, the state of our provisions, until both of us were more desirous of sleep than discussion, then we went to our bedrolls. We've been traveling for days, trudging through the dense forest that conceals our destination. Our spirits have been dampened by the realization that we are truly lost, unsure of where to turn. The trees all look the same. The landmarks that were meant to guide us are nowhere to be found. But then, as we round a bend on the trail, Hofnir caught sight of a large stone jutting out from the ground. As Hofnir drew closer, he saw that it's been carved with familiar lines of our alphabet. It's a rune stone, and it hasn't been here for long. He called the rest of the band over, and as we huddled around the stone, reading the message that had been inscribed on it, it told us that the villages we seek are just a day's journey ahead, and that we should stay on this trail until we reach the river. From there, we will see the village on the other side. Relief washes over us as we realize that our search is nearly at an end. We all take a moment to touch the runestone, as if seeking its blessing before continuing on our way. The stone stands as a testament to those who came before us, a guidepost that has led us out of our confusion and toward the answers we seek. The band had been walking for hours through the dense forest. The only sounds were the crunching of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. The air was thick with tension, and everyone was on edge. They knew that danger lurked in these woods, but they had no choice but to press on. Suddenly, one of the older warriors let out a blood-curdling scream. He dropped his pack and took off running into the brush, his feet pounding against the ground as he disappeared from view. His wife, who had been walking a few paces behind him, took off after him without hesitation, disappearing too. The sound of her footsteps faded away, and then she let out the most horrific scream you could imagine. The remaining band members stood frozen, unsure of what to do. They strained their ears, listening for any sign of what had happened to their companions, but the only sound was the rustling leaves in the wind. As the time slowed to a crawl, the tension mounted. What had caused the man to scream and run? Was it an animal, his nerves, or something more sinister? And what had happened to his wife? No one dared to move for what felt like an eternity, but was likely a few moments, fearing that they too would be snatched away into the darkness. The silence was deafening, and the band members were left with only their thoughts and fears for company. "We have to find them. We have to go after them," one of the women said. "No," Hofnir bit back, the stress getting the better of him. "Everybody stay on the trail and with the band." Children, women, and even some of the men could be heard crying, whimpering. The weight of the journey was starting to get to all of us. It was as though the woods themselves were alive, watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. The hairs on the back of their necks stood on end as they awaited the inevitable, whatever it may be. Slowly we began walking again, continuing down the trail as Hofnir commanded. Some children could be heard sniffling, but the previous panic had given way to a determination to put distance between us and whatever had just happened. We were all feeding off of one another's nerves, and soon our entire band was running down the trail until we reached a clearing, which provided at least some sense of comfort and relief from the oppressive and unrelenting forest canopy we had been trudging under. As the sun began to set, we all huddled together, still shaken by the strange and eerie occurrences of the past few days. I knew we needed to make a fire, to bring some sense of normalcy to our situation, and so I set to work. But as the physical sensations of fear began to subside, the tension and arguments in our group flared up with a vengeance. The Christians among us blamed Satan for our misfortunes, while the old believers insisted that dark spirits were at play. The fervor of the Christians was intense, and soon enough one of them stood up with a look of utter conviction in his eyes. "I cannot continue on this journey with those who turn a blind eye to the work of the Lord," he declared, his voice ringing out into the stillness of the forest. His wife and other converts joined his side, and the rest of us watched in a mixture of fear and disbelief as they gathered their belongings and set off into the woods. Hofnir and I tried to convince them to stay, but the Christian man was resolute in his decision. My assurances and crafted words were of no use. The division and loss of our companions was a bitter potion to swallow, and we stood there in stunned silence as they disappeared into the night. Now our group was halved, and I couldn't help but wonder what other terrors lay ahead for us. And for the first time, I felt I had failed the group, and failed Hofnir. That night I heard a strange sound, and saw Hofnir by himself, sobbing. I decided not to disturb him, as I didn't want to hurt his pride any more than it already had been. Our hearts had been set on the village of our kin, the place where we were meant to find sanctuary and a new beginning. With each step closer, our anticipation grew, and our spirits partially lifted with the thought of finally reaching our destination. But as we crested the hill and saw the village below, our hopes were shattered. The sight that greeted us was one of devastation and despair. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke, and the sound of crackling embers filled our ears. We stood frozen, struck silent by the horror before us. Our dreams of a fresh start reduced to nothing more than a pile of smoldering ruins. This was not what we had expected. This was not what we had hoped for. This was not what we had sacrificed so much to find. And as we stood there, in stunned disbelief, the weight of our loss hit us with a crushing force, leaving us broken and shattered, mere shadows of our former selves. Hofnir broke the statue-like trance with a painful and bellowing scream, calling out for his brother and his kin. He began running at full speed toward the village, and after him went a couple of our band members. I felt as if my mind was in deep water. My thoughts were murky and slow. I couldn't move. The sight was too much to bear. My mind reeled at the sight of the carnage that lay before us. This was the village that Hofnir's brother had founded, and now it was a graveyard. Everyone else finally dismounted and began to search for survivors. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, to get as far away from this cursed place as I could, but I couldn't leave the dead to their fate. As I slowly walked through the ruins, the hairs on the back of my neck began to rise. It was as if the very air around me was alive with the whispers of the slaughtered, calling out for vengeance. That's when I heard it. A low growl, just at the edge of my hearing. I turned to face the sound, but there was nothing there. Just the ruins of the village and the corpses of my kin. And then I saw them. Shadows moving in the corner of my eye. Figures darting between the burnt-out husks of houses. They were impossible to make out, but their presence was undeniable. I turned to run, to join my bandmates and flee this cursed place. But I was too late. The shadows descended upon me, tearing at my flesh with claws and teeth. I screamed, but no one came to my aid. All my vision faded to black. I knew one thing for certain. The horrors that had befallen our village were not natural. Something ancient and evil had awoken, and we were its prey. As the darkness encircled me, I could feel my vitality being sapped away. My vision tunneled, narrowing down to a small flicker of light. But within that dimming light, I saw the face of Hofnir, my leader, my brother in arms, charging through the darkness, charging through the dark figures that now surrounded the remains of the burnt village. With a Herculean effort, Hofnir broke through the veil of the shadows, his sword slashing through the darkness that threatened to engulf me. The shadows recoiled with an unearthly scream, affording me a moment's respite. Hofnir reached down, his weathered hand finding mine. "Hold on, brother. Our ancestors stand with us." Hofnir's voice was a soothing balm amidst the chaos. With the last ounce of my strength, I rose to my feet, my sword now gleaming with a strange light. We stood back to back, a formidable bulwark against the encroaching darkness. Around us, the remaining band rallied, their faces etched with determination and a newfound hope. The divide that had once threatened to shatter our bond now forged anew in the crucible of shared adversity. With a shared unspoken understanding, Hofnir and I led the charge against the shadows, our swords dancing a deadly dance of light amidst the darkness. Each strike banished a fragment of the abyss that had sought to engulf us. The cries of our band, a symphony of resolve, filled the night as we fought to reclaim the dream that had brought us to this land. The night seemed to stretch endlessly, each moment a pitched battle between hope and despair, yet with each fallen shadow the dawn edged closer, its first rays piercing the dark canopy of the forest. And then, as the morning sun cast its golden rays upon the desolate village, a silence fell upon the land. The shadows dissipated like mist before the sun, leaving behind a tranquility that belied the battle of the night before. Hofnir and I stood amidst the ruins of what was to be our new beginning, our eyes meeting in a shared recognition of the ordeal that we had faced together. We will rebuild, and we will honor the memories of those we've lost. Hofnir's voice was firm, echoing through the silence that enveloped us. As the band began the solemn task of laying to rest those who had fallen, I gazed at the horizon. The endless woods that had once seemed a menacing mystery now held a promise of hope. We had faced the unknown and emerged from it stronger, united by a bond forged in the depths of despair. The sun rose higher, casting a gentle warmth upon the land, as if to beckon us toward the new life that awaited. Amidst the ruins, amidst the memories of bygone dreams and the ghosts of the night, a new hope blossomed. It was a harsh beginning in a land unknown, but it was a beginning nonetheless. And as the day unfolded, the band set to work, their resolve unbroken, their spirits unyielding to the trials that had beset them. in the hushed whispers of the wind through the ancient trees, in the soft murmurs of the river that flowed nearby, I could hear a whisper of the legacy that awaited us. The trials of the past night were but a prelude to the saga that would be etched in the annals of time. A saga of valor, of undying hope, and of a journey into the unknown that had bound us together, forging a legend that would resonate throughout the ages.